this is always a bittersweet episode, the last episode of a season.
I know.
I should have prepped people by saying, wait, let me go back. This is the last episode of this season. Of course we'll be back, but we're going to have a little time between seasons, not very long, and we'll be back soon. But this episode, we have gone back and forth, Nicki, on what we wanted to do in this episode. And
literally gone back and forth.
What's been burning both of us is to talk about what we're seeing on social media regarding nutrition. And it's funny because when I really made Quiet the Diet, my goal was to make Quiet the Diet about real nutrition information, real functional medicine information, but also about dispelling a lot of what I see in the nutrition world and in the context of society and how what we preach in nutrition changes. The science changes, our perception of the science changes, and that all happens from cases of morality, of society changing. So this episode is going to be what trends we're seeing on social media and really just for us to lay the landscape of why this has happened in the first place and also how we can safeguard ourselves, you, the listener, while viewing social media, while looking through it. I will tell you that this is going to be a very spicy episode, but I'm gonna stay cool and calm. But I get revved up. I know Nicki gets revved up about this because for me, I feel like the fact that healthcare information is monetized in the first place and that food companies have marketing that the fact that healthcare is a business in the first place is already puts us at a huge disadvantage for getting true information, I think. Mm-hmm. So I get very nervous with what I see on social media. For consumers, I get very frustrated because I see really guerrilla sales tactics all over the place. And I also see just what I don't believe is, again, and I'm saying this in a specific way, what I don't believe is true nutrition information. Now, we're going to talk about how subjective nutrition information is in a moment, but I would say that a lot of what I see is not what I would consider true, factual nutrition information. What do you think, Nicki?
I mean, I would be just crazy if I said I didn't agree with you, because I do, and I feel like we've had these conversations. I've had these conversations with other friends of mine that are dietitians, and it can be frustrating sometimes, particularly when you're looking at nutrition information, because since everyone eats, not everyone, but a lot of influencers tend to put themselves out there as nutrition experts because they're eating 3, 4, 5 times a day. And just because I have feet doesn't make me a podiatrist. There's, you know what I mean? But for some reason with nutrition, people look at it very differently. And there's this idea of, someone looks a certain way. I'm thinking in particular, I'm just going to start off the bat, just giving examples. There's a huge trend of what I eat in a day videos, which can be great for ideas, for healthy meals, etc. But I would say 80% of them, 90% of them are starting with an ab check. So people are showing their abs and then showing what they eat in a day. And it's this implication, if you eat the same exact thing as me, you will look the same way as me. And us being in the nutrition world, we know that's not the case. Bodies are different. People are different. In the fitness world, people are showcasing a bulk that they're on. They're eating 3,000 calories and they're showcasing their abs. And I was on a bulk. I couldn't eat 3,000 calories. That just isn't how my body works. But we have to be able to look at these videos and accounts on social media with some knowledge that we'll give you today in terms of how am I actually supposed to take this information? What's the truth? What's not? How do I even decipher what is and what isn't? And I mean, there's so many other examples I can think of. It's sickening.
Oh yeah, we're definitely this is really, what you're saying about the what I eat in a day is really important because Nicki, even if you and I, we're similar-ish heights, you have a tremendous amount more muscle mass than I do. You even two people who don't look that dissimilar, I think we look pretty dissimilar, but we're in the same realm of looking the same, let's say. What me being a person who has lost 100 pounds, like I lost a lot of muscle in that process too. Again, what you eat versus what I eat is so different, and the way that our bodies process it is so different. So when you're looking at a person, you have to understand you're looking at not only who that person is right now, but what their entire medical and health and nutrition history has been before. So that is absolutely scary that people are doing the ab checks and then doing the body checks, they call them, right? And then they're doing, here's what I eat in a day, because they are very intentionally drawing the link saying what I eat equals this body. And a person who's always been in a smaller body, again, versus someone like me, there's no way that our bodies are going to process things the same. We don't have the same cellular makeup. It's definitely not going to happen. So right off the bat, that's an issue. So, all right. We kind of know at this point, like, what's the really toxic social media stuff, right? Like, people get very triggered by before and after pictures at times. That's dependent on the person. We know anything that's pro eating disorder, we can pretty much spot it out at this point. And I think people have really strayed away from that. What I want to talk about today is what is in the middle that scares me, because obviously someone saying like you should eat as little as possible and move as much as possible and, starve yourself, we can instantly see that at this point in time in society and say this is a problem. When I was growing up, there were like pro anorexia pages and we weren't even knowing they were bad or not. Like it's just totally different now. We have all leveled up, I would say, together. In kind of the sneaky diet culture realm, there are now like, you can have food freedom, but also count your macros at the same time. Counting macros can be food freedom. And we've talked about this on Quiet the Diet in many episodes, but the premise of Quiet the Diet has always been bridging the gap between functional nutrition and body positivity / intuitive eating. All right. So in the nutrition world, let's say we're breaking it down into, I'm going to put it 3 kind of points. All right. Functional nutrition, holistic health. That'll be one category. Another category will be conventional nutrition, like registered dietitians. And my third category would be health at every size / intuitive eating practitioners. Okay. So on each category, we kind of see different practitioners doing different things. And there's extremes in every category. So on the kind of furthest side, on the health at every size body positivity group, are people who post the all foods fit videos. This is not every single intuitive eating practitioner. And what I want to make clear also is that intuitive eating is not just, if I intuitively ate, I'd eat Oreos all the time. That's not what intuitive eating is at all. There's 10 principles. They're scientifically backed for people to have a more supportive relationship with their bodies and their and food. But I also don't believe that intuitive eating is an answer to physical health problems, basically at all, to be honest with you. That's my controversial opinion, but I do love intuitive eating as a means to connect with our bodies and have a better relationship with food. And that's pretty much as far as it extends. And I've gotten more strong on this stance as time goes on. So Nicki, you sent me the other day one of those all foods fit videos. And what I mean by all foods fit is the premise that, hey, no food's going to kill you. No food even really relates to health problems. You can just eat what you intuitively do want to eat. And this is where it's fake intuitive eating, because that's not actually what intuitive eating is, right? Intuitive eating is a system and a set of principles to help you develop a better and more in tune relationship with food. It is not eat whatever you want at all. You have to tap in with yourself. It's totally not like that. So these basically all foods fit practitioners are making videos. And as Nicki pointed out, this is a total stereotype that I'm saying. This is absolutely not accurate for every single one of these practitioners, but a lot of them are very thin-bodied, naturally thin-bodied practitioners, many of whom openly disclose that they've had eating disorders in the past. And Nicki, tell us what was in this picture you sent me. Tell us, kind of describe the picture for the audience.
So I've seen this many, many times from many, many different, let's say, influencers, but what bothers me more is when I see it from practitioners. So if I see it from...
especially dietitians.
Exactly. So like an intuitive eating, someone who promotes themselves as an intuitive eating dietitian. And, for example, looking at like a large Starbucks drink and you're saying, we can, here's my order. This is, excites me every day. And it has like 3 pumps of one flavor, 2 pumps of another flavor. We know there's a certain amount of sugar and a certain amount of, other, just things that we might not want to be having first thing in the morning, especially on an empty stomach, or really kind of at all. But on a routine basis, like, let's load all of these things into one drink. And then, this person in particular doesn't promote their body, but at the same time, they're a very thin-bodied person. So also people will look at this and think, oh, I can have that and look a certain way. But then what comes from that, because I have also been on that end of Instagram thinking that way. And then there's this disappointment that comes in when inevitably you think that there's something wrong with you when you can't drink a Frappuccino every day and look the way that these people look. But we're not even, and from a practitioner standpoint, like we're talking about internal health. Like, that should be our main focus as dietitians.
Absolutely right.
And in a world where we're increasingly moving toward this level of metabolic dysfunction, and we need to really be doing everything that we can to, promote things that, lead to proper metabolic function, optimal function of the body. We shouldn't be promoting certain things that might lead people astray. And we're not talking about like trying to create food fears in people. Like, of course, we don't want people to fully restrict, but at the same time, I think you had posted this recently on Instagram. What we now look at as just eating a healthy diet is now considered restriction because of the world that we live in. And we're just surrounded by
totally
just an insane amount of food access, that to just maintain a pretty normal, healthy diet in the context of the past couple hundred years, that's now a restriction. So yeah, now I'm just talking in circles because I get so riled up about it, but that's the gist of what we see.
It's not that you're talking circles, it's that I need to pull apart some of the really important things you said. So first of all, what is a nutritionist? What is a dietitian? What is our job, right? Our job is to talk about the nutritional effects of food, to talk about the context and health of how food impacts us on a every single level, a biological, it could be even a spiritual level, like these dietitians talk about, it's fine. All these things. And I always, of course, talk about the whole of the person, and that's what real functional nutrition is, right? It's holistic, the whole of the body. But we are first and foremost nutrition professionals. We are dietetics professionals, right? Which means that we have to focus on nutrition as being a major feature of our health. When I see a dietitian posting about drinking a crazy Frappuccino and saying, you can have this too, this is my favorite order, like promoting, first of all, a food company. You're promoting, they're good. Starbucks is good. They're like $1 trillion company, I'm sure. I think they're fine. They don't need your promotion. And then just promoting, again, like people, if someone is going to, it's just, there's so many levels where it bothers me. It bothers me on a food accessibility level. If people are following this information for free and they have this $7 drink. She got like a venti Frappuccino with, I'm not kidding, Nicki. What I looked it up after, it was like 60, 70 grams of sugar or something like that.
I did spend like 10, 15 minutes after calculating the sugar in it because I was like, this is crazy.
It was, yeah. Again, if we can't look to nutrition professionals to provide nutrition information, who are we going to look to, right? And I know that social media, again, is free. This is a private commodity that we are electing to put up, but it is so counterintuitive for a dietitian to be promoting something that is objectively unhealthy. And let me go over what objectively means, okay? Nutrition information is always changing. Our understanding of nutrition information is changing, but the mechanisms of how our pancreas and our cells process sugar is not changing. It is absolutely not changing. And you know why it's not changing? Because we can tangibly look at someone's blood sugar in real time and see what the impacts are. And if your blood sugar goes above a certain level, it's dangerous. And if your blood sugar goes below a certain level, it's dangerous. So this information in my head is now going, as I'm talking, is now escalating to dangerous, right? That's enough to put someone at a major metabolic disadvantage in the long term and actually a potential medical issue in the short term. So it's nice, and I understand that a lot of these practitioners truly are doing this because they had eating disorders themselves and they do not want to demonize certain foods. But at some point, we have to ethically understand that as dietitians, as nutritionists, and I'm speaking not only to you, the listener, but to other practitioners, that we need to know what's objectively healthy and not objectively healthy. I can promise you there's not one person in the world that needs a Frappuccino and that a Frappuccino will benefit on any level. Now, again, maybe from a psychological perspective, saying, hey, I can have Frappuccinos and nothing bad will happen to me if I have an eating disorder is important for someone. But I still don't believe that people with eating disorders necessarily need this dietitian to be promoting this food commodity. I don't believe that that is important in healing at all. And I would say, you know, by the time you're seeing these messages, your algorithm's probably skewed into the intuitive eating paradigm. And what, again, these practitioners who are, some of them are not in this all foods fit model. Many of them are focused on just hunger and satiety cues. That's amazing. But they are also not disseminating nutrition information anymore. They are talking specifically about the psychology of food, which is part of our degree, but it is not all of our degree. We're missing the big chunk of our degree. And you know what the other problem is? Eating disorders are deadly. They are important. People suffering from them are important, and their needs are important. They are not the general population who's seeing things on social media. So a lot of these dietitians who we know that dietitians disproportionately suffer from eating disorders, a lot of them, I think the information is skewed, as in like I'm seeing like 70% of dietitians posting this, and when we're looking at 10 to 15 to 20% of people who are suffering from some sort of eating disorder. So the information is not being targeted to the right people because it's being targeted to the general population. So I think there needs to be resources for people who are suffering with eating disorders. Like more than anything in the world, I think it's essential. And I also think there needs to be resources for the 70% of people who are in larger bodies and who being in larger bodies impacts their health. I think that they deserve information too. And a lot of the intuitive eating information is relevant to everyone, but much of it is not. So I just need to say, I'm going to walk us back for a second too and talk about what does it mean to be objective in nutrition information, and how do we know if it's subjective or objective? So I think the important thing to know is that when functional dietitians look at nutrition information, what we want to understand is, how does food interact in our environment? There is something called nutritionism, which is the idea that one food component or one food can drastically impact our health. And I think that's something we want to get away from. Especially on social media, I see a lot of like the top 10 most anti-inflammatory foods or like things like that. And I see this from my functional RDs who are amazing practitioners too. And there's amazing intuitive eating practitioners too. But food isn't medicine. And I'm a functional dietitian. When I say food isn't medicine, what I mean is that food is a healing agent as a part of a greater toolbox for sure. But food is not like the cure-all for every ailment you have. You still have to look at every single other aspect of your lifestyle. Food is not going to completely heal or cure most advanced autoimmune conditions. It is a tremendously important tool, and it certainly, when you're consuming the wrong foods, can make things worse. But I think we overemphasize in the functional nutrition social media space how impactful food is on a healing journey, and I think we underemphasize it in the intuitive eating space. I just talked for a long time, Nicki. Go ahead.
No, I completely agree. And I think just in my own personal experience, going through some autoimmune stuff and going through certain things prior to my nutrition degree, there was a hyperfixation on the food because it tends to be, I mean, no pun intended, honestly, the lowest hanging fruit, because it's all people talk about. There's all this, information out there about food. This food can cure you. Don't have this food. Eating this food one time will just set off all of your symptoms for 3 weeks, which depending on the person that can happen. But I think what it comes down to is it can be very, very confusing to be seeing both messaging. So you can go like, especially when you're sitting there dealing with either a new diagnosis or symptoms that are just unexplained, and your whole life is, thrown in the air and you're just so confused on what to do. You're seeing all foods fit and you're like, oh, maybe I should just be able to eat everything. Like, why can't I just have the foods that I want to have and feel better? So
And
then
wait,
you go,
I need to hold you there for a second, because that's really, really important. There's two pieces to that. So people who have chronic illness are looking at the intuitive eating pages and feeling something like this. It's so unfair that I can't eat those foods. How is this person like in a body that I would love to have? They seem so healthy. They're in this body that looks great aesthetically, and they're consuming freaking frappuccinos. And I can't even have a tomato without having, a rash or something like that. It feels like and I like to say this a lot, which is that intuitive eating is a privilege for people. It is a privilege for people who are not suffering from chronic illness. We know with our clients, Nicki, that they could be in really deep symptomatic states, and they might not be tolerating a lot. And our goal is to get them to tolerate more. We don't try to cut foods down. We're always trying to add foods back in after they've been on these long journeys. But that's the first thing they're probably feeling is like, damn, I literally have to do 2 hours of things to get out of bed every morning. Like, I have to make sure I do my exercise. I have to drink water before I even stand up. I have to do all these things. And they're just walking to Starbucks and getting a frappuccino and they feel great. Like, that's not an inclusive feeling. That's not a good feeling to have. And then also they're getting this information of the unfairness. And on the other hand, they're thinking, maybe the reason I'm chronically ill is just because I have a bad relationship with food. Maybe if I just had this Starbucks frappuccino, it would heal all of my autoimmune conditions. That's what intuitive eating says. It can help with diabetes and all these medical conditions. Maybe I just maybe my bad relationship with food is the reason that I'm not healthy.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's obviously these two categories is, someone who's witnessing all of this from a chronic illness standpoint and someone who's witnessing it not from a chronic illness standpoint. But speaking first from a chronic illness standpoint, we can tolerate different things at different stages of our healing journey. So maybe intuitive eating is something we can graduate to after we have gone through all of these, different components of our healing journey, which, by the way, our nutrition is a part of it, but it's not all of it. And then there's the other side of things where we're then seeing these holistic accounts that are saying, oh, the reason why you are still having symptoms is because you're having, a tablespoon of creamer in your coffee, or because you're having coffee, because you're having a bite of one thing. That's the reason why your symptoms are still there. Not because you're chronically stressed, not because you're not sleeping, not because you're not hydrating or, don't have adequate mineral status, but it's because of just the food. It's only the food. So then you're hopping back and forth and seesawing between these two different types of accounts. And then you're just lost. Then it's like, now I'm so confused. I have no idea. I either should be eating nothing or I should be eating everything. And I think the problem with social media in general is that it lacks nuance. It lacks individualization. That people are putting information out there for the general public.
Or for themselves, Nicki.
Really,
a lot of people are really putting it out for themselves because they
Yeah.
want to show their Starbucks thing and they want to say, look at what I'm doing. Look what I'm doing. Let's be real about that too for a second.
Yeah. And there's two components of it. I think in my opinion, when it comes to influencers or people who are posting, I think there's the group of people that are posting for primarily clickbait. So they're like, oh, I know this will get a lot of comments. This will get a lot of likes. This will get a lot of shares, even if it's coming from a negative standpoint, but that'll just bump me up in rankings. And then I'll get more followers. I'll have more brand deals, et cetera. It's a money-making machine. And then there's the other side of things where I do think some people post these things because they're like, this helped me in my healing journey. I had anorexia. I had restrictive eating. And so in drinking these frappuccinos, it saved my health. And so that can be great for you. That can be, oh, I'm happy that worked for you. But I would argue that the majority of people first of all, everyone needs a completely different approach. And second of all, the majority of people, that's not what helps what's going to help them. And as a practitioner, it's your job to know that just because something helped you in your one anecdotal experience doesn't mean that it's going to help the majority of people or really anyone else. Yeah.
So this brings me to this idea of nutritional objectivity and consensus. What I need people to understand is that we as dietitians practice basically independently. So we have licenses in some states. We are registered as dietitians. So we absolutely have to maintain certain standards of decorum, not a question, professional integrity. But the way that we practice can be literally opposite of each other. My friends who are functional dietitians, the work that they're doing, and myself and you, Nicki, is nothing like what an eating disorder dietitian is doing. It's nothing like what a clinical dietitian is doing. We are giving sometimes opposite recommendations. And the question must be, well, how is that possible, right? How is it possible that two dietitians can think of things so differently? And it's because we don't really have what I would call a nutritional consensus. So we do have the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, which tells us position papers, standards, what they kind of feel is acceptable. But we are not bound by the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics to disseminate specific types of nutrition information. Now, if we were disseminating harmful information, that's a whole different conversation. But I have friends who are keto dietitians, right? I have friends who are eating disorder dietitians. The way that we interpret nutrition is extremely subjective. So yes, you can literally be on Instagram and within 1 minute see two completely opposite posts, which just so doesn't help. So what I at least try to do on social media is I try to let people know what I'm seeing from both sides and say, here's how to be discerning from both sides, because you quite literally can get opposite information in a 2-second time span. So the reason for that, again, is that we don't have nutritional consensus. Two dietitians don't agree. And a new stream of dietitians that I see a lot, and you'll notice, by the way, in this conversation, I am talking about dietitians. I am not talking about nutritionists. Really quick distinction, by the way, a registered dietitian is someone who has completed a Master's of Nutritional Science and has completed a dietetic internship and then sat for a board exam, basically. The dietetic internship is a year-long program where you work as a dietitian, essentially, but you're shadowing people and learning from them during that time. So it could be like a 7 or 8 year degree. Nutritionists, in many states, there is no standard for. So you can be an IIN nutritionist, go to the Integrated School for Nutrition. It's like a 6-month to a year program, I think. You could be a functional nutritionist and have done like Andrea Nakayama's functional nutrition program. There is not a standard for that. So when you see people who are holistic health coaches or nutritionists, understand they could have anywhere from 0 to 10 years of education. Dietitians are more regulated, but I don't believe that dietitians are the only nutrition experts, which is very different coming from a dietitian. Part of the kind of what I would call like propaganda machine of dietitians is just constantly reiterating we're the only nutrition professionals. I don't believe that at all. I think naturopathic physicians, CNS, FNTPs, I think there's a lot of really, really good nutritionists too. And I don't think that being a dietitian is the end all be all. Food marketing too, like that's part of it. I think that the biochemical parts of the nutrition degree are amazing and we learn really good, like baseline mechanistic scientific information. But I actually did a poll on my Instagram recently and I asked, when registered dietitians graduated school, what percentage of them felt that they were ready to see clients? And 1% said they felt ready to see clients when they first graduated school. So this is hard to say as a dietitian, all of this, because I love being a dietitian. I would go back and get my degree 100 times over, but we can't just take at face value that someone says they're an expert. We need to be discerning viewers and consumers of social media. So I'm not saying that I think that the likelihood of someone being a dietitian and disseminating good information is probably higher, but it does not necessarily mean the information is for you. It does not necessarily mean that that person is not posting it for themselves, because we don't have nutritional consensus. And someone who is coming from a different life path might have different information. So you kind of want to align with people who probably get you, right? If I had an autoimmune condition, I would be going to a functional dietitian. I would not be going to an intuitive eating practitioner. If I had an eating disorder, I probably may not feel ready to go to a functional dietitian, and maybe I would want to go to an intuitive eating practitioner. So you need to look at not only the information someone's posting, but I don't want you to assume that just because someone has a degree that their information is for you, or that they're posting correct information, to be honest with you. Nutrition information is so different now than it was 10 years ago. It's so different now than it was 30 years ago. We have to remember, like, even in the context of health, that like at one point, medical doctors were saying smoking cigarettes is great. Like, we have to really rely on ourselves to discern, which is hard. And I would also say that just social media in general, don't go with just degrees. Go with intuition around it. Do you feel like this person is communicating a story that's good for you? And then also just try not to get nutrition information or medical advice from social media, because I have to say, and this is so honest, it's a business platform for people, right? They are promoting things very intentionally to support their own businesses, to hit on pain points and things like that. So just go in really discerning. Don't assume just because someone has one type of degree or another that they're better or worse. And I'm saying that as dietitian, which is supposed to be like the top-notch best one, right? And I think functional dietitians are the freaking best. But don't roll with someone just because of that, and do not take every piece of information at face value. I'm sorry to say we can't do that. So that's the thing I need to talk about with nutritional consensus. Now, when it comes to those like camps, we talked about my concerns in the intuitive eating, all foods fit side. In the conventional nutrition side, just like regular dietitians, there is also now a group of like what I would call like misinformation fighters. And they are just hunting and attacking functional dietitians. And what their goal is to basically apply nutritionism and single studies to broader audiences. And so it's a lot of like those food science, food research kind of pages. And they're just like, aspartame won't kill you. Now, I think it's good to not be afraid of everything all the time. But when you're looking at one study, or you're looking at one specific food, and a dietitian is mentioning one study or one specific food without mentioning the mechanism that the body goes through, like I know there was a huge thing with the omega-6 fats, and everyone's saying, a lot of dietitians were saying, omega-6 fats aren't bad for you, they're not inflammatory, because there was no randomized controlled trial saying that. But my question to all these dietitians was like, okay, we get that. Let's look at what happens when omega-6 fats are introduced into the body and broken down in the body. Like, you can literally see the inflammatory pathway. And also, like, let's apply knowledge. Like, when we were in the hospital and when I say omega-6 fats, I mean, they're the ones that are commonly found in vegetable oils, which we know in the 1990s was super like, yes, you should eat vegetable oils. They're really healthy, heart healthy. And now there's kind of the opposite reaction, saying that actually consumption of them is extremely dangerous and could be driving all the chronic illnesses that we're seeing. So it's almost completely flipped on its head. But there's now dietitians who are giving backlash to that and saying, no, omega-6 fats are heart healthy for you. In fact, when we were working in hospitals and we were working with people on tube feedings, you actually couldn't have a certain proportion of omega-6 fats to omega-3s because it was so inflammatory for people who were in compromised positions that it could result in death. So it is or major medical outcomes. Death would be the most extreme case. But we have to, again, on social media, look at the mechanism. I'm talking to anyone consuming it. Don't worry about one random meta-analysis about omega-6 fats being okay for you. I would look into you can go on Wikipedia or Google and look at what happens when omega-6 fats are broken down into the body. So I'm not so concerned about one random meta-analysis. I'm more concerned about what I'm seeing in real life people. So that's the kind of dietitians or practitioners you do want to follow, is people who are looking at trends and pattern recognition, not people who are saying this one study means everything. This one nutrient means everything. You have to look at it. And you have to look at people, I think, who are like healers, who have just seen real life people and their actual experiences, versus people who are just day in and day out looking at the studies. And, there might not be a study saying that lemon water can help with digestion, but I watch it happen all the time. I watch it happen and it's not for everyone, but I don't really need a study to experiment lemon water with someone. because it's cheap. And if it's effective and it's cheap and it's safe, because lemon's something we'd be having abundantly in our diets anyway, I'd rather take the risk with someone of doing that than being a dietitian who's online saying lemon water. There's no studies to say that lemon water helps with digestion. It's like, who are you helping? You're preventing someone from taking a risk with some lemon water? Like, that's not helping anyone. Let people self-experiment. And I want you, the listener, I want you to play around. I want you to self-experiment. Now, that doesn't mean take like medications experimentally or even nutritional supplements experimentally, but the power of healing comes from the fact that you will know what's the best for your body. So I think that kind of middle food science, nutrition professionals who are very stuck on specific studies and not looking at mechanism, not looking at patterns, not looking at real people and real results. I think I also question, like, who even funded these studies? Like, I don't need a meta-analysis to ask a client if they want to try drinking a little lemon water with salt in the morning, So I think that's another leg of dietetics that I find troubling in that middle. And I find it so troubling because I always ask this question: who are you helping? Maybe someone is really afraid of drinking aspartame and Diet Coke, and then they see the study and they're like, great, I can drink a lot of Diet Coke. Is that helping them heal an eating disorder? What is that helping them do to promote people eating processed foods of any kind? Who are you helping? That's always my question. And as the consumer, I want you to think, how is this helping me? How is this helping me?
And I think when some of these people are posting things like, don't be afraid of whatever it is, like soda or something. Yes. Should we be terrified of soda as we would be of, like, getting
Poison.
into,
Right.
of like poison? No, for sure not. And if you had a couple sips of something, or even if you had a can like one time, you'd probably be totally fine. But I think where it gets misconstrued is when, yes, we shouldn't be afraid of these foods, but at the same time, that also doesn't mean we should be consuming them every day or even on any type of routine basis. So and I would argue that even the people posting that information, I guarantee you, are not eating those foods every day. They're not. I mean, some of them actually probably are, but
I'm promoting them, by the way.
Yeah. But as a viewer, you're like, oh, this thing, because we're so, as humans, we want to put things in a bucket of good or bad. So when we see information like that, we're like, oh, this thing has now moved from the bad bucket to the good bucket. That means it's okay all the time, as much as I want. But that's not how bodies work. So it's more about, what are we doing on a consistent basis? And we know, okay, if you had, a half of someone's can of Diet Coke, and you probably did that once every 3 months, like, depending on your situation, you'd probably be okay. But at the same time, if you have an option, should you choose something different? Yes. So we can look at these things with nuance, and we also have responsibility as a viewer to understand that life is about that nuance. It's not that something is in the good bucket or the bad bucket. It's more about using our common sense to say, okay, yes, let's maybe not have these food fears, and let's not be afraid of food as we would be afraid of something that's like an immediate threat to us. But at the same time, something that we consume on a consistent basis can be a threat to us. And so we need to have this level of understanding in terms of, okay, I want to be cautious about what I put into my body. I know that, I don't want fear to be a part of it, but we also have to have a level of, responsibility and understanding of that nuance. And the other thing that you had mentioned was this idea of self-experimenting. And I completely agree. Like, we have to be able to see what works for us versus what works for someone else. But at the same time, we have to understand, are we getting, because we had mentioned nutrition is just a piece of the puzzle. So are we getting all of those other pieces of the puzzle as well before we go out and spend, just because I had so many friends talk to me about these like TikTok trends that it's like a supplement that costs like $85. And they're like, should I go out and buy this? I'm like, how are you sleeping at night? And they're like, well, my sleep isn't great. And I'm like, well, maybe focus on the sleep first before buying the focus supplement, because no focus supplement is going to be strong enough to give you focus if you're not sleeping. So that is a kind of a part of our decision process as well.
Well, Nicki, you just brought up the most important part of this conversation, is that there is no one food that's going to kill you unless you're allergic to it, then, very dangerous. There's not one food that's going to do that kind of harm. And there's also not one food that's going to fix you. There's not one supplement that's going to do that kind of harm, or really that one supplement that's going to really fix you. And I think, again, when I see the holistic health space, these supplements will fix you. When I see the conventional nutrition space, these supplements will kill you. It's like, it's definitely neither. It's definitely neither. It's going to be somewhere in the middle. But when you're being sold to, I think you need to, first of all, you have to understand, and I'm saying this so seriously, you have to understand you're being sold to constantly by practitioners, even on social media. Like, it is a website for business. We have to be clear about that, okay? Everyone is, I wouldn't say guilty of it, because it's literally, that's the place, but every post you see is probably some level of a sales tactic. So understanding by the time you're seeing an ad for this digestion pill or whatever the thing is that you are being sold to. So look at this information, ask yourself, what am I being sold here? Is this going to actually help me? And does this make sense from a foundational standpoint? We intuitively know we have to be, we talk about this in every episode almost of this season, but we have to be human first. We have to sleep. We have to eat regularly. We have to get sunlight. We have to talk to people that we love. We have to be in nature, right? We have to drink water. We have to do all of these things. And until we can correct all of those things, nothing else is going to fix anything. Even I love some of my supplements. Like, I love them. No replacement for the human stuff. So, and taking that back to what we ask ourselves when we're looking at social media, ask, like, is this foundational? Is this essential information for me to consume? Is this shifting something inside of me in a positive way? And what you always want to be going towards is listening to yourself, not listening to other people, feeling safe around food, and then making ultimately food choices that are beneficial for your health. So again, I would ask, and all the dietitians posting about saying, aspartame doesn't cause cancer. Okay. And, well, how does that, all right, it doesn't cause cancer. So what does that tell me about what I need to do in my daily habits to change my life? If I feel like crap every day, does knowing that aspartame doesn't cause cancer help me every single day? Does that help me? That's the questions that you want to be asking when you're looking at studies. And I'm always really cautious when I'm posting, because I have like a lot of PubMed, studies that I have on my sidebar. I'm like, oh, will I share this? Will I share this? Different journal studies. And I'm always asking, does this help anyone? Or the question we asked before, is it just helping the person? Like, does the person just want to post about their Frappuccino? Like, I don't know. Like, maybe it's just not even, maybe it is a thoughtless thing where it's just like, oh, I'll just post about this. Does this person think they're helping people with eating disorders? Probably, and maybe, and that could be something too. But think about who is posting this information. What do I want from this person? How is this helping and affecting me? And how am I incorporating that into the foundations of my life? That's the questions I would be asking. Like, I find there's entire dietitian accounts who are wildly popular, and all they do is they repost and rip down other holistic healthcare professionals, many of whom I love and trust and value. And it's much more unpopular. A lot of functional dietitians also will do like supermarket tours, and they'll like be like, oh, this food's good for you. This food's bad for you. If I'm food shopping, I like this. And then the conventional nutritionist will say, you're creating food fears in people. But at what point are we actually allowed to give nutrition information, right? I think you, the person listening to this podcast, you actually want nutrition information, but you also understand, because you're smart and seeking it and are adult humans who can make decisions for yourself, and I fully trust you can, you also understand that you're going to take things with a grain of salt and look at social media as just more data as opposed to impacting everything you do. And I know that you won't look at a functional dietitian who's saying you should choose almond butter over peanut butter or something like that for inflammation reasons, let's say, and then say, peanut butter is going to kill me. Like, if that is how you're feeling around social media, I would say social media might not be safe for you. And that's something to consider too. If you can look at social media and just look at it like data, and just say, oh, great, I got this information. Great, I can use this. I cannot use this. It's a good time for you to use it. If you are triggered by social media, which is totally possible because it's super freaking triggering, or it's not adding value to your life, but confusing you more and making you more unhealthy in any way, it just might not be the time. Maybe it's not the time for it. And if you're finding, again, the confusion of nutrition information and you really don't trust a lot of the sources, unfollow people, block people, anything you need to do. If you're finding that it's a negative space, unfollow and block, because that's another piece of this too, which is that social media on the whole is not great for our mental health. And if it's adding more stress to your life than adding more positive influence to your life, try to get it down as much as we possibly can too.
And same thing, if that's coming from either a person or an ad on Instagram, you can click, I think it's the top right corner, these like 3 dots. Like you can click that and ask Instagram to not show you things like that post in the future. So you can do that with ads for, whatever, if you're getting an ad for something that you feel triggered by. And also know that if you're feeling triggered, it might just mean that you're in a part of your journey that you're a little bit hypersensitive right now, which is completely okay. Yeah. And know that that might not persist forever. Like you might a year from now, 6 months from now, then go on and be able to see all that stuff and be completely fine with it. So know that it's not permanent. Like that feeling is not permanent, but it might be a sign that something internal is, something feels off. Like you know intuitively that something doesn't feel right when you're on these accounts. And if you do go on social media, like it should be a break from reality. It should be something that lifts up part of your day. Like if you're seeing accounts that don't bring you, it's like that spark. Who was Marie Kondo? Like if this clothing doesn't spark joy,
spark joy, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you're in that stage where you really just need social media to spark joy, curate your TikTok to be just a bunch of videos of like dogs and babies, because that is extremely therapeutic and amazing. But if you're in a place of your journey where you can take this information as just data and you really want to learn and you're not triggered by that information, then you can start to follow some of these accounts that you do feel are reputable. And if someone, I hate to say this because it's so cliche, but if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. Like if there was a supplement that just made everyone insanely healthier just by taking it like one time or one different thing or one different food, wouldn't we all be cured by now? Like we would all be fabulous. Like if I love blueberries, they have extremely beneficial properties, but if eating blueberries and doing nothing else at all completely cured your brain health and the rest of your problems, I'm pretty sure like we would all just be completely fine at eating blueberries every day. So we need all of these different components as pieces to our puzzle, but try not to believe anyone that tells you that one piece of the puzzle is that one thing. Yeah.
I have to say, Nicki, what I've liked seeing on social media, it's very cute. Like I've seen on TikTok castor oils having like a moment, and I'm like, I love that for castor oil. And again, if it's a cheap solution and you're willing to experiment in a safe way, but you're not saying this is going to fix everything, I think it's totally fine to play and get excited about something, about the healing properties of supplements, foods, oils, things like that. And especially when those modalities have been tried, true, and practiced for thousands of years in Ayurveda, traditional Chinese medicine, and other indigenous medicine forms. Like, if you're seeing castor oil on social media, understand also it's not like these people are inventing using castor oil for these reasons. They're sharing ancient information. So that's also what I would be looking at is, are the people who are sharing the holistic remedies also using, yes, evidence-based science, but also ancient traditions and understanding and respecting and honoring those traditions and knowing where they came from. I think that would be really important, because in America, we say anything that's not Western medicine is snake oil. Anything that's not Western medicine is hoopla and whatever. I don't know what word to use, but that's not at all how functional dietitians feel. It's certainly not how practitioners of Eastern medicine feel. And they are valid practices that are tried and true and very different than random stuff online. You're not going to find studies about Eastern medicine modalities the same way you're going to find studies about Western medicine, because we're an evidence-based for-profit model of science. So it doesn't mean just because you see something, A, that you should write it off, B, that it's going to fix all of your problems or anything like that, and C, that the practitioner has made it up themselves or something like that. Very oftentimes we're being taken back to those ancient modalities, which just need to hammer this point again. When people are so obsessed with evidence-based science and they dismiss 10,000 years of ancient information, it is ignorance. I mean, that's just ignorance. And it's also very narrow-minded and narrow-sighted for other cultures and other inherent truths of science that we somehow, like, from the creation of modern medicine, I think it's like anywhere from 100, it's either 100 or 300 years that it's been around, but that we just dismiss the other 10,000 years in favor of the 100. Same thing with intuitive eating. We're favoring a 30-year body of information over a 10,000 year body of information. To me, just makes like no sense. And I want to learn as much as I can about things that are tried, tested, and true in any culture I can learn from in any way over time. And I think we should all be so open-minded. And there's quite a difference between what we perceive in America as evidence-based medicine and what other cultures perceive as evidence-based medicine. We think it has to be done in a lab. Other people think if you repeat it for 10,000 years, you'll get some good information. And I think that's my concern with social media too, is that when we get so evidence-based obsessed, we lose sight of the big picture, which is that there's a world outside of our labs. There's a world of information outside, and it's been meticulously passed down. And that is what good science is.
I mean, you said it, but I can't even try to reiterate what you said because you said it so well. And the last point that I wanted to make was, I think a lot of times the comeback that we hear from the intuitive eating world is, oh, well, this hasn't just been around. We've eaten intuitively for centuries, but we were able to eat intuitively because we had access to real food and to,
Correct.
And our stress levels were, I mean, we had different stressors, yes, for sure. But, the world that we live in now is not the same world that we lived in 100 years ago, 300 years ago, 1,000 years ago. It is constantly evolving. And so we have to evolve with it. And if that means that we need to, spend a little extra time on sleep when it's something that we never had to really think that much about, then that's something we have to do. If we have to not purchase something at the grocery store so that it's not sitting in our kitchen because it's been manufactured to be hyper palatable to us, we can either use an insane amount of willpower, like every single day, to try to, avoid something that is designed to make us eat more of it, or we can just make it a little bit easier on ourselves and say, hey, let me try to just not keep that in my kitchen or to not have, that around me all of the time. But of course, we know if we have, it's not to say that we should be afraid of certain foods, as we said before. It's more of the fact that as the world changes, we have to kind of change our approach along with it. And so that would be my response to that argument that I see on social media a lot in terms of intuitive eating.
And in ways of the world changing, Nicki, which is our last piece that I want to talk about, what we consider to be normal in ways of illness is obscene. Yeah. Obscene. We are the sickest we've ever been in this country, especially. It's different when it's more in developing nations who have low access to food and water and essential needs. In a country where, first of all, essential needs should be met. It's ridiculous that we have in this country so many people go without essential needs. That's obscene to start with. But now we're up to over 60% of people are suffering from some sort of chronic illness, or cancer, heart disease. I mean, it's not even conceivable how sick we are given how much money we have compared to other places. We are one of the sickest countries in the entire world, and we have the absolute most money in healthcare. So what I see a lot on social media too is a lot of those conventional dietitians I was talking about saying, listen, there's no evidence-based cure for Crohn's disease. You just have it. And I'm like, would you have just had it 50 years ago? Are we really not going to talk about or think about the fact that our food system has changed and our consumption of pharmaceutical medications has changed so much? When do we know what's freaking normal or not? And I think a lot of the intuitive eating practitioners and a lot of conventional dietitians do not believe that food impacts our health. I don't believe that they think that. I think that they think autoimmune conditions come up randomly. I think that they believe cancer comes up randomly. And that whole model of thinking is so counter to what we do, Nicki, and so counter to what functional dietitians do. Because we very much understand how every single thing that happens in your life, if you're in a moldy environment, if you drink a certain drink, if you don't sleep, if you have a stressed out fight with your friend, everything impacts us. So I take things very seriously when it comes to my clients' health. And I think that everything that we do is so important, whereby it's kind of like this thing where it's like, if you have some Starbucks, at least you'll have a good relationship with food. Like, I'm out here, Nicki, you're out here. Like, we are fighting to, as much as we can, shift on an individual basis, because I don't think we can shift on a system-wide basis, the idea that we can't heal. Like, we literally watch people heal from these conditions all the time. And that doesn't mean, maybe it could mean going into remission. I don't want to use the word healing as this flirty, fun kind of word, but like, truly watch their labs change, go down to almost zero symptoms. Like, we watch it every single day. So when people say it's not possible to reverse IBD, it's like, okay, but then why is everyone who's a really good practitioner doing it with their clients? Like, how are their clients actually able to do that? And the answer is, we do have a great capacity to heal. And the problem is that we do not all agree on that. And that's what you're seeing on social media. People do not believe in ancient practices. They do not believe in our capacity to heal. And they do not believe that the reason that so many of us are sick is anything but genetic and coincidence. And I absolutely emphatically disagree with that. I believe that our food system, our pharmaceutical system, our way of thinking about our bodies, the fact that we interact all the time on social media, not in person, all of this matters. What you do in your health matters. You are important. If you're listening to this, you are so important. And what you do every second matters, because your life matters. And that's the premise, I think, that really separates all of us, and why we can't get on the same page from a consensus standpoint. Because Nicki, honestly, when we were in dietetic school, you're not learning about reversing conditions. You're learning about managing them, right? You're learning about, if it's acid reflux, it's like, well, don't eat foods that are going to irritate it. As a functional dietitian, we learn, well, why is your body producing excess acid? Why, or not enough, or whatever it is. So until we get that premise together and we're all on the same page, which we'll never be on the same page about, because people are not going to dismiss what they learned in school. Many people, some people will. We are not going to see uniform content across social media. And that's also a good thing, because there's a time and a season and a place for you to consume different parts of media. So this is what I would say to you. If I was you and I was a consumer of social media, what I would want to look at is, first of all, that information feels relevant to me. It feels like it's coming from a safe place. It feels like it's helpful. And it feels like the person is targeting an audience that is like me. That's what I would be looking at on social media. And then also take the information with not only a grain of salt, like it's a little tiny piece of data. It's not even that much. Oh, that's nice. Blueberries are good for me. That's great. Okay, maybe I'll have some blueberries. Awesome. Not like blueberries are going to reverse my brain degeneration or something like that. It's always blueberries and the brain stuff too, but because of the antioxidants. But think about, again, how can I take this information and apply it from a foundational perspective? Not, I have to do this one thing and this is the thing, this is the thing. That's what I would say about social media. And I know we went in a million directions today about the landscape of social media, but there are incredible intuitive eating dietitians. There are incredible functional dietitians and incredible conventional dietitians. But they have to be the right person for you, and they have to be giving helpful information for you, and just be aware. I don't care if it's me or Nicki. Everyone, this is their business website if they're a dietitian, right? Even if they're just throwing stuff up like I do, be wary of everyone. Be wary of everything on social media. And it's so frustrating and heartbreaking for me to see a lot of these posts, like a dietitian posting a 70 gram of sugar frappuccino, where I know my clients who are suffering from blood sugar dysregulation, that could throw them off for 3 days. I mean, that is really frustrating to me, because we want to be trusted professionals. I want all dietitians to have the same baseline understanding. And when I say baseline understanding, it's that your health matters. You have the capacity to heal in some level from your health. Eating real foods is always better than eating processed foods. There's no exception to that. Like eating food that looks like food is always better. That's an easy thing. And I would say that you have to get your foundational health together first. Get your sleep together, get your nature together, get your connections together, get your eating regularly together before you start ordering fancy supplements and like that. If you go in with that mindset, social media can be a fun playground as opposed to the most important thing for your health, which I don't want it to be. Even on my page, which is I hope to be as nuanced as I possibly can be, and as uncalculated as I can be, and just telling you what I see. But I even want you to be wary of the really good practitioners too, because it doesn't matter what they've experienced or what their clients have experienced. I want you to experience it for yourself.
The only thing I would add to that in terms of actionable items to take home with you after listening to this episode is, one, how long you're on social media for. So even if you are looking at it as just data, there's a cap on how long you can how much you can absorb without starting to feel like your mind is swirling. So know that, again, just like as all of the stuff with food we were talking about, there is that middle ground as well with just how long. Like if you're scrolling for 3 hours, it doesn't matter what you're looking at. Like you probably need to kind of give it a break, come back to it later. The other thing is know maybe when it's the right time. So there's some days where you might realize today is not a social media day. Like no matter what I see, I'm already not feeling my best. I'm going to be and I feel like a lot of people have this conversation with like, if they are seeing a bunch of people, they're trying to get pregnant and they see a bunch of people having babies and they're like, this is just, it's too much. It's too much emotionally for me to take right now. And so we can do the same thing with the nutrition piece of it. So if you feel like you're having either a bad body image day or you're struggling a little bit, like know that it's okay if that day you stay off and then maybe tomorrow you go on. Like it doesn't have to be this all or nothing thing. You can kind of learn yourself and learn. A really good way to do this is, I was told one time, I was laying on the couch already in a bad mood looking at Instagram years ago, and my boyfriend he didn't even look at my phone. He looked at my face and he was like, "Are you on Instagram?" And I was like, "Yeah, how do you know?" He's like, "Because your face just got a little more upset. Like you just look sad." So you can kind of know, how did I feel before going on and how did I feel coming off? And if the answer is that it was more of a negative outcome, then maybe that's kind of your sign. And then the other days, if you feel like you go on and you come off of social media happier, then maybe you're following the right people and it was the right day to go on. But just know it's like everything else where it's not an all or nothing thing, and you can kind of learn when is the right time.
100%. And I know that parts of this episode were aggressive and this is something I have sat on for a long time, but I always want you to leave with a positive note, which is that if there is information that is meant to meet you, I believe it will meet you, and you will find the right practitioners and the right people to follow that are safe and smart and helpful. I believe that you have the capacity to heal in a major way, and I believe you will come across the information you need to do that. We are so excited about season 3 already. We already have some big stuff brewing, and we will see you very soon. Thank you so much for listening, and be totally tough on social media and don't take crap from anybody. And we'll see you next season.
Bye.